Summary of the Stone Angel by Margaret Laurence. Hagar Shipley, who was born Hagar Curry in Manawaska, Manitoba, in 1886, thinks back on her life at the age of 90. She is weak but determined. She has spent more and more time in her memories as she has gotten older. It helps her escape her sad and limiting present situation. Living with her son Marvin and his wife Doris, or rather, they live with her in a house she bought many years ago. Hagar is constantly sick to her stomach and stiff from arthritis. Hagar escapes into the past more and more often as she worries that Doris and Marvin are planning to send her to a nursing home. Hagar's mother died giving birth to her, and since her burial, a pricey stone angel with blank, unseeing eyes has watched over her family's grave in the Manawaska graveyard. Hagar grew up with two brothers, Matt and Dan, and a Scottish immigrant father named Jason Curry. Jason came from a famous family of Highlanders and opened the first general store in Manawaska on his own. Hagar made a few friends in town, such as Charlotte Tapper, Lottie Dreiser, Telford Simmons, and Henry Pearl. After getting bronchitis as a teen, Hagar's brother Dan passed away. When her brother Matt asked Hagar to pretend to be their mother and support Dan on his deathbed, she said no. This was a turning point in her life that will last for years. During her childhood, Hagar kept hesitating before finally making a choice that would split her family apart for good. She was fed up with being stuck and feeling stifled by the expectations of being a traditional woman. Hagar accepted Brampton Shipley's marriage proposal. Bram was an older farmer who lived on the edge of town. He was rude and crude, had two grown children from a previous marriage, and had questionable finances, making him a bad choice in every way except one. Marrying Bram freed Hagar from her strict father's demands and gave her the chance to go out on her own for the first time in her life. Hagar's worst fears come true when she finds an ad in the newspaper for a care home called Silverthreads. Doris and Marvin are planning to send her away. Hagar is afraid to leave her home and all the things she has collected over the years. Still, as the days go by, Hagar becomes more aware of how much stress she's putting on Doris and Marvin. Her frequent falls need their steady attention and often physical effort, and they don't like how stubborn she is. It is suggested by Marvin and Doris that Hagar talk to a doctor about where to live. Her friends in town started to see her differently after she married Bram and her brother Matt died. She had left the social scene in Manawaska to be with Bram, and the only thing that made her feel better was her strong physical attraction to him. If not for his bad behavior, dirty habits, and obvious disregard for her feelings, their marriage would have been sad. Marvin and Doris are sure that Hagar would be better off with professional care after her visit to the doctor and the X-rays that follow, but they won't tell her the results of the tests. People try to bring her by Silverthreads just to show her the facilities, but Hagar is angry and scared, so she is rude and closed off, and she demands to be taken home right away. Over the next few days, Hagar wets the bed, yells at Marvin and Doris, and talks badly about people in public. Finally, Marvin makes up his mind and tells Hagar that she will be going to the nursing home in a week. The two kids Bram had with Hagar are named Marvin and John. From the moment John was born, Hagar loved him the most and always showed him extra love, attention, and special treatment because he seemed more sensitive than his bigger brother. Hagar could never see her son as anything but perfect, even when John started acting crazy and rebellious at school by fighting with other kids and playing chicken on the railroad tracks on a nearby trestle bridge. Not so with Bram. He didn't pay much attention to the boy, even after Marvin, then 17, joined the army and fought in the First World War. When Hagar had an embarrassing event in town, she realized how much her marriage to Bram had changed her and made her different from everyone else. She decided to leave with John and her most important things. Bram didn't care much, but Hagar was sad when she had to leave Manawaska. Because Hagar doesn't want to go to the nursing home, she comes up with a way to stop Marvin and Doris's plan. When Doris leaves her house by herself one morning, Hagar steals one of her Social Security checks, runs away, and hops on a bus to Shadow Point, a coastal forest area. Even though she is tired when she gets there, Hagar hides in an empty building, even though she risks being seen, being attacked by homeless people, and going hungry in order to stay independent. When Hagar left Bram, she took John with her and found work as a maid for Mr. Oatley, a rich former pirate. The old man became friendly with Hagar, and Hagar loved having her own room in the big house. Being forced to live in someone else's house, on the other hand, made John angry, and he started to be more secretive. He started dating girls and writing letters to Bram without telling Hagar. During the Great Depression, John and Hagar lost a lot of money that they had saved to send John to college. This made John even more angry at Hagar, and he chose to go back to Manaoaka rather than deal with the loss that the depression had caused him. After a few years, John wrote to Hagar to tell her that Bram was dying. Hagar quickly went to be with her husband during his last weeks. When she got there, the house was dirty and in bad shape, and both Bram and John were drunk and unfocused from drinking too much homemade wine. John acted carelessly, talked badly, and showed off his lack of money like it was a badge of honor. Hagar couldn't recognize either her son or her husband, so when Bram finally died, it was almost a relief for her, even though John was devastated by the news. Hagar wanders around Shadow Point, living off of a small bag of food she bought before she left town and walking through the woods. Though, she quickly gives up because she is weak and tired, and as she tries harder, she hides deeper into her memories. Not long after Bram died, John started seeing Arlene Simmons, who was the daughter of Hagar's childhood friends Lottie Dreiser and Telford Simmons. Hagar and Lottie planned to send Arlene out to work in the East because they were afraid that her son would reject her and that Arlene's fall from grace would be like her own. John was hurt badly, and Hagar told him that all she ever wanted was for him to be happy. But John got angry and started spending more and more time out, getting drunk and embarrassing himself as he drove around town. Hagar hides out in an old cannery. When night falls, she hears a noise and thinks someone is trying to rob her. But the man who walks into the broken-down building is just as scared of Hagar as she is of him. The guy says his name is Murray F. Lees, and even though Hagar thinks Marvin and Doris sent him to get her, Murray says he has nothing to do with either of them. Murray offers to share some wine with Hagar because he is drunk and by himself. As they talk about their lives, they learn that they have both lost kids in painful ways. Hank Pearl came to Hagar's door one night in Manaoaka to tell her there had been an accident. John had Arlene with him when he drove his truck across the trestle bridge. He hit an oncoming train and had to drive his car off the bridge. John was taken to the hospital, but Arlene died when the car hit her. John died because of injuries he got inside the car crash. Hagar got there just in time to say goodbye to him. But Hagar never cried for her son. She thought she had turned into a stone angel in the cemetery because she was heartless, unchangeable, and blind. When Hagar wakes up the next morning, Murray is not there. She is sick to her stomach, and cold. Just as her thoughts start to get mixed up, Marvin, Murray, and Doris walk into the cannery. At first, Hagar doesn't want to be taken away, but she eventually gives in and lets them bring her to the car, where they tell her the truth. Her x-rays showed that she has a disease in her bowels, so she shouldn't go to Silverthreads but should go straight to the hospital. In a nearby hospital's public ward, Hagar fights against both the nurses' care and the nurses' friends who make friends with her. After being moved to a semi-private room, she slowly becomes friends with Sandra Wong, a young girl who was admitted with appendicitis, and starts to accept that she is going to die soon. People like Doris, Mr. Troy, a preacher, and Stephen, Marvin and Doris's son, come to see Hagar. She has a hard time accepting the kindness of those around her, even though she's caused them a lot of trouble, as her situation gets worse. For what she did, she says sorry to Doris and Marvin. She also tells Marvin that he was always a better kid to her than John. Hagar's pain gets worse, but she feels more at peace and ease when she spends more time floating into the cocoon that her pain medicine gives her. However, when a nurse tries to help her drink from a glass of water, Hagar is as stubborn as ever and refuses to let the nurse hold the glass.
About the author. Margaret Laurence was born Jean Margaret Weems on July 18, 1926 in Neepawa, Manitoba. Her mother died when she was 4 years old, and her father died when she was 9 years old. She spent the rest of her life living with her stepmother and brother in the house of her maternal grandpa. In the mid-1940s, she moved away from home to go to United College in Winnipeg. During college, she managed the student literary magazine and released poems, stories, and articles. After she graduated, she worked at a small, independent newspaper in her area until she got married. After they got married, her husband's engineering job took them to England and Africa. In the 1960s, she started writing professionally, and soon after, she and her husband split up. Laurence went around Canada and worked at the University of Toronto and Trent University while he was newly independent and doing well as a writer. Laurence was a very literary and left-leaning writer. Her works often took place in Manawaca, a town she made up, and they were about the moral problems of colonialism, the pain of loss, the humiliation of old age, and the difficulty of domestic love. There are some characters who appear in both The Stone Angel and The Diviners, but they are not directly connected. Both books are considered classics of Canadian writing, but they are not usually taught in schools. Laurence killed herself at home in 1987 after being told in 1986 that her cancer had spread to other parts of her body.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.